seagrass in the dunes to keep them stable. And you can see how a natural landscape, at least it looks like a natural landscape, is influenced by humans by putting forests on them, by claiming the dunes, etc. Windmills, the famous windmills, the old windmills we are so proud of, and the new windmills we don't like, at least a lot of people don't like. It's probably a matter of time. The windmills were used to produce landscape, were used to transform lakes into agricultural land, for example. And it produces landscape, like here in the West Beemster. Also pieces of the country that don't look very, at the first glance, don't look very touched by humans are very much touched indeed, like heather fields here in Drenthe, the northeastern province, very much influenced by people. You can see it here from the top. And of course, very visible is the use of the energy the landscape produced, and which we took from the landscape. For example, taking peat from the landscape. We've been doing that for centuries to have fuel for fires, and it transformed the landscape in what we see now. An old peat landscape is transformed into a cultural landscape. So every landscape in the Netherlands and also in a lot of Europe, I know, is touched by humans and is transformed by humans. And I'm very glad that in the European Landscape Convention it said that everybody deserves a beautiful landscape. And it's every government which signed the convention, also the Netherlands, have a responsibility for that. What we see in the Netherlands in the last years is that people start worrying more about the landscape qualities because the quality of landscape is declining. There's a lot of social engagement. For example, this is an action from last year, protect the coast. A lot of people were worried about building plans alongside the coast, and there have been also questions in the parliament, and now there is a deal which will be signed in a month, where all the governments concerning the coast are claiming that they want to protect the coast and refrain from building a lot more buildings. Also in the parliament, there's a lot of political attention. These are questions in the parliament about quality of the landscape. These wonderful ladies are taking a lot of questions for their account. So landscape qualities are under pressure, always, you could say, for decades already. It's normal when a country is developing so fast. The Netherlands is, in fact, especially if you look from a bit of distance, like from above, and here's all the lights in the evening, the Netherlands is in fact an empty city. Habitat types, you can see that the Netherlands is not doing very well. If you look at all Europe, we are just above Greece, but Greece is not measured, so we're not doing very well. The appreciation of landscape is also decreasing. This is the grade people, the appreciation people give to the landscape, and the red areas and the yellow areas are not very high, as you can imagine. There has been some measuring on the qualities of the landscape, but it's not very much systemized, you could say. Monitoring is very important because landscape transformations go very slowly, usually, sometimes very fast, and then people know it, and then people protest, and then sometimes things can be done. But especially the long-term, the slow processes are very hard to see and to notice, and usually on old pictures you can see that it was very different before. So monitoring is a must. It goes slowly. Trees grow slowly, but also changes grow slowly. Measuring is knowing. So knowledge about what's going on in the landscape is very important. And you can do it in measuring, you can do it in different ways, very different ways. By mapping, this is an old map of 100 years ago, and this is the same area 100 years later. So you can see that this changes on a high level of scale, you can do it on a very low level of scale. But also pictures are, photographs are used sometimes, We just, as the College of Rijksadviseurs, we just started a project, a very interesting project, I think, by photographing again pictures that were made in the 70s. Rijn-Jan Mulder was a young man in the beginning of the 70s, and he was an artist, and he was obsessed with being an objective photographer. And we are very glad that he was obsessed with it, because now we have still the pictures, and we have asked him, together with a young photographer, a young lady, to make those pictures again 40 years later, and we chose especially a young photographer, so in the next decades she can photograph them again. What he did is very interesting. He made a grid on every topographical map which there is of the Netherlands. He wanted to be as objective as possible, so he took the maps which have a certain size and certain section, and he put a cross over it, and the middle point of that he would go there and take pictures on north, east, south and west. And those pictures, the whole collection is complete. There's the book, this one. I asked him to come here, and I hope he will be here in the pause, in the break. You can probably meet him and buy a book.
We are Dutch.
Some pictures, because at this moment they are being photographed. Cleo Wechter is the new photographer. She is halfway. I just talked to her this week. And you can see that some of the changes which you will see. Here you can see that farmhouses are growing. You can see that trees are growing, but also windmills are disappearing. And sometimes even trees are growing and appearing. And we are doing this for the whole country according to the grid that Rijn-Jan has designed. So monitoring is important, but monitoring should be improved. If you look at the way monitoring is done now in the Netherlands, it's quite fragmented. All those organizations and even more, which you can see here, provinces, national organizations, and also research institutes are doing some monitoring, but it's not integrated into one system. And I think it's very important to put it into one system, in one network. And it's not that one person or one organization should do it all, but it should be connected together in one organization. And the Dutch government is obliged, the national government is obliged to identify, control and preserve the Dutch landscape according to the European Landscape Convention and Grenada. So they should play a coordinating role. It's a pity that Rolf Heringa is now just gone. He probably knew what I was going to say. And I think we could learn from the way Natura 2000 areas are monitored. These are the Nature 2000 areas in the Netherlands. And you could do it more or less the same way. You could say monitoring of the landscape is done by landscape organizations, which is like the Landscape Observatory, which now have, is already doing. The second layer on that can be the provinces. Jan Jacob talked about the important roles of the province in that. It's about integrating and managing the data, I propose. On top of that, we have the National Planning Office, the PDL, and they can make information accessible and aggregate knowledge, so the policy, the national policy can, and also the regional and provincial policy can use it. And on top of that, the national government could manage, facilitate, communicate, learn, and translate it into national policy as well. This is my proposal. But we should do more than monitoring. Because monitoring is only measuring what we have and how what we have is changing. But there are many things happening in the landscape in the Netherlands and also abroad, of course. The Netherlands is always in transition. This is a scheme of the RCE, which we are here, which shows, you cannot see it very well, I guess, but shows that landscape has always been in transition, and it will always be. That's one character of the landscape. But we have very large transitions coming. We are in the middle of a trend, or in the beginning, in fact, of in the Netherlands at least, we have only 5% sustainable energy. So we are in 2050, we want to be more or less sustainable in our energy production. And this transition towards an energy neutral landscape will transform the landscape very largely. And we should guide it. And it doesn't help only to monitor it, only to see what is disappearing or what's changing. We should also be active in it and develop new qualities. Also, a climate resilient landscape in the lowlands of our countries, for more or less half of it below sea level, we should put a lot of attention to that, and we are doing that as well. But also sustainable food production, that's also a big transition coming on. Urban growth, the next decades we have to build another 1 million houses in our country, which is a lot. And we have to do it in a way that the landscape is not destructed, but the landscape is developed as well. There is a very interesting advice of the National Board of the Physical Environment. It's called Connecting Landscape, and it proposes to use landscape as a very important layer on which all those transitions take place, and to guide and to design on this landscape so that the transitions will take place in a good way and produce new landscape qualities. And it's a very interesting one, I think. Because landscape is the battleground for the big transitions that are coming. And those transitions should generate new landscape qualities. And this is an interesting example of new landscape qualities which are generated in the west, alongside the rivers, because we have to adapt to climate change, and it also produces new landscape qualities. So I would like to conclude with two questions to you, or two I don't know, conclusions for myself. One is, let us improve monitoring, so we are able to follow the actual development of the landscape. And the second is, let us develop new landscape qualities by adapting an integrated designing approach in guiding the huge transitions taking place in the landscape in the coming decades. Thank you very much.